I hadn't meant to stop by that afternoon. It was one of those days where you tell yourself you're just taking the long way home. No reason, no plan. And then somehow you're standing at her front gate, pretending to check your phone like it has the answer for why you're there. She was in the garden, sleeves rolled to her elbows, damp soil on her fingers. 40-something, maybe mid-40s, but I never really thought about her age. It wasn't the number that got me. It was the way her eyes seemed to know more than I could ever put into words, the way she could hold silence without it turning awkward. "Afternoon," she said, straightening up. Her voice always felt like it belonged to a warmer season than the one we were in. "Hey," I replied, shoving my hands in my pockets. "I was just passing by." It was a bad lie, and we both knew it. She brushed some dirt off her palm, watching me for a moment too long, like she was deciding whether to let me off the hook. "You've got that look again," she said. "What look?" "The one you get before you say something you won't." I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that doesn't make it past your throat. She turned back to the flower bed, kneeling, and I stepped closer without meaning to. The air smelled faintly of lavender and wet earth, and I found myself studying the way the light touched her hair, softer than I'd remembered. She glanced up. "You're quiet today." "I'm just thinking," I said. Dangerous habit. The corner of her mouth lifted, but there was something else in her expression, something caught between amusement and hesitation. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the soil, and I realized I was close enough to see the faint smudge of dirt on her cheek. I thought about telling her. Instead, I just stood there, feeling that quiet pull again, the one that had been there since the first time I'd noticed her looking at me like she could see further than anyone else could. "You never just come here for nothing," she said finally. "I guess not." My voice sounded softer than I meant it to. She straightened again, brushing off her knees, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Not the kind of look that's searching for words, the kind that says them without sound. Then she took a step toward me, and another. The distance between us, which had always felt charged, disappeared until I could feel her presence as much as see it. My chest tightened, but I didn't move back. Her eyes flicked to my mouth for a fraction of a second, then back up. She leaned in slightly, like she was going to say something but wanted me to decide whether I'd let her. I started, but the words fell apart in my throat. Whatever she whispered, it was soft enough to feel more than hear, and it went straight to the place I'd been trying not to name for months. And then, before I could say anything, before I could even take a breath, her phone rang from somewhere inside the house. She stepped back, eyes holding mine for one lingering moment. "Don't move," she said, and disappeared through the door. The ring of her phone faded into the house, leaving the garden too quiet. I stayed where I was, like she'd told me, my hands heavy in my pockets. I could still feel the warmth of her breath on my skin. Whatever she'd whispered wasn't even a full sentence, just a fragment, but it replayed in my head like it meant something I wasn't ready to decode. When she returned, she had a faint crease between her brows. "Sorry," she said, brushing a strand of hair back. "That was nothing important." I didn't believe her, but I didn't push. She motioned toward the porch. "Come in." "Coffee." The kitchen was warm, smelling faintly of cinnamon. I'd been here before, not often, but enough to know where the mugs were. She poured 2 cups, her movements unhurried, like she was buying herself time. I watched her from the corner of my eye. She'd been divorced for years. People whispered that her marriage had ended quietly, but not kindly. I knew she didn't have kids, at least, not ones who visited, but there were framed photographs of nieces and nephews on the shelf, all smiles in places I'd never been. And me? I didn't have much of a story to tell. 23. A couple of short-lived relationships, mostly my fault for drifting out before things got too real. Maybe that was why I kept finding my way here. She didn't ask for more than I could give, but somehow I wanted to. "You're a million miles away," she said, sliding a mug toward me. I shrugged. "Just thinking." She gave me that look again, the one that made me feel both seen and exposed. "You're always thinking," she said softly. "One day you'll tell me what about." The silence stretched. I thought about telling her that this, right here, was the risk, that every time I came over, I told myself I wouldn't notice the way her hand brushed my arm when she passed, or how her laugh felt like something I'd been missing. that I wouldn't wonder if she noticed me noticing. Instead, I asked, why me? Her brows lifted slightly. Why you what? Why do you let me hang around? She smiled faintly, stirring her coffee though she didn't add anything to it. Maybe I like the company. It wasn't an answer, not really. But the way she said it made my pulse quicken. We sat there for a while, the hum of the fridge filling the space between us. I caught her watching me once, but she didn't look away fast enough. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. My hand brushed hers as I reached for the handle. Just a passing touch, skin against skin, nothing anyone would notice. But she didn't pull away, and neither did I. It was the smallest contact, yet it carried the weight of everything we weren't saying. 2 days passed before I saw her again. I told myself I wouldn't, that I'd give it space, let whatever that touch at the door had meant fade into the background. But Saturday afternoon, I found myself on her street again, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets like I was protecting a secret from the air itself. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I almost turned back, until I saw her coming from the corner shop, a paper bag in her arms. You stalking me now? She called, half smiling. Pure coincidence, I lied. She didn't argue, just unlocked the door and held it open for me. You might as well help carry these. Inside, she started unpacking groceries, moving easily around the kitchen. I tried to match her pace, passing her things from the bag, but my mind was still on that last moment we'd shared. Then came the sound, a sharp knock at the door. She froze, eyes flicking toward me before walking to answer it. A man stood there, mid-40s, tall, with a kind of practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't need an introduction. I'd seen him once, months ago, in a framed photo that was no longer on the shelf. Didn't know you were in town, she said carefully. I was nearby. Thought I'd drop in, he replied. His eyes flicked past her to me. Company. She hesitated. A friend. The word hit sharper than it should have. I gave a polite nod, mumbling something about leaving, but she stopped me with a hand on my arm. A small, firm pressure that said stay. The man, her ex, I assumed, stepped inside like he still had the right. He stayed 10 minutes, maybe less, making small talk that felt anything but small. She was polite, but there was an undercurrent there, something tight in her posture. When he left, she shut the door slowly, her back resting against it for a beat before she turned to me. Sorry about that, she said. You don't have to explain. She met my gaze for a long moment, then looked away, busying herself with putting away the last of the groceries. The silence between us thickened. I could feel her wanting to say something, and me wanting to hear it, but neither of us moving first. I stepped closer, just enough for her to notice. Does he come around often? No, she said quietly, and I'd rather he didn't. The words hung there. I reached past her to place a box on the shelf, my hand brushing hers again. She didn't pull back this time. We both knew we were leaning into something we shouldn't, but neither of us stepped away. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message lighting the screen. She ignored it. For a second, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. It had been a week of silence. Not an angry silence. The kind that feels like holding your breath underwater, waiting to see if the other person will reach for you first. I told myself I wouldn't go to her house. I lasted until Thursday evening. She answered the door in a soft gray sweater, hair pulled back like she'd been in for the night. I wasn't expecting you, she said. I know. Something flickered in her eyes, but she stepped aside to let me in. The living room was dim except for the low lamp in the corner. The air smelled faintly of wine and whatever she'd been cooking earlier. We sat opposite each other, neither speaking for a long moment. Finally, she broke the quiet. You've been distant. You haven't exactly been around either. She gave a small, humorless smile. Maybe I thought space would make this easier. This? I asked. You and me. The words hung there like they'd been waiting for weeks. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Is that what you want? For this to be easier? Her gaze dropped to her hands. You're too young to get tangled in this. Don't, I said sharply. Don't make it about that. She looked up at me then, and whatever she saw must have shaken her, because she stood and walked toward the kitchen. I followed. This isn't fair to you, she said, keeping her back to me. I stepped closer, my voice low. Do you think I don't know what I'm doing? She turned then, and the space between us felt suddenly too small. I think you have no idea what it's like to want something you're not allowed to have. And she cut herself off, swallowing hard. The air was thick, charged. I could see the pulse in her neck, the tension in her jaw. I reached out, my fingers brushing her wrist. She didn't pull away. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for a reason not to. If I let this happen, I won't be able to stop, she whispered. Then don't stop. Something broke in her expression then. Fear, desire, maybe both. You don't understand, she said, but her voice was softer now, trembling. I stepped in until we were close enough to feel each breath. My hand slid up her arm, slow, deliberate. She stayed still, watching me like every second was a choice she might regret, but couldn't unmake. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, I thought this was it, that whatever line had been keeping us apart was about to disappear. Then came the sound, the creak of the front gate swinging open. Footsteps on the porch. Her eyes went wide. We didn't move. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Neither of us breathed. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, steady, like the person knew they'd be answered. She pulled back from me fast, smoothing her sweater like she could erase the moment. Stay here, she whispered. I stayed in the kitchen, close enough to hear her open the door. Hi, Aunt Claire. The voice was male, familiar, but it took me a second to place it. Then it hit. Tyler. My old roommate. The guy who'd mentioned, once in passing, that he had an aunt who lived nearby. My chest tightened. I didn't know you were in town, she said evenly. Yeah, just for a couple days, Tyler replied. Figured I'd drop in. Didn't think you'd mind. I could picture the easy grin on his face, the same one he used when he thought everything was fine. I was just making tea, she said. Come in. I stepped into the hall before I could think better of it. Tyler's grin froze when he saw me. Hey, I said, trying for casual. What are you? He stopped mid-sentence, glancing between us. His smile didn't come back. You two know each other? Claire's voice was calm. Yes. He's a friend. The word again. Friend. Tyler's eyes narrowed just slightly, and I knew right then that he wasn't buying it. He stayed 15 minutes, maybe 20, but the air was different now. Too many pauses. Too much unsaid. When he finally left, he gave me a look I couldn't read. Not anger, not yet, but something close. The door shut behind him with a soft click. Claire leaned against it, closing her eyes. That was not ideal. I moved closer. He's going to ask questions. I know. Her hands were trembling. Not much, but enough for me to notice. Do you want me to talk to him? I asked. She shook her head. No, I'll handle it. The problem was, neither of us could control what Tyler chose to believe. And if he put it together, if he decided to tell anyone else, this thing between us would no longer be just ours. I wanted to tell her I didn't care. That whatever risk there was, I'd take it. But she was looking at me in that way again, weighing the cost, seeing further down the road than I could. I don't want to lose this, I said quietly. Her gaze softened, but there was a shadow in it now. Then we have to be careful. More careful than we've been. It should have felt like a step back. Instead, it felt like the walls were closing in, forcing us closer whether we liked it or not. Outside, I heard the sound of Tyler's car starting. For a moment, I almost ran after him. Instead, I turned back to her. And in her eyes, I saw it. The decision she'd just made. Whatever it was, I knew it would change everything. It rained all night. By morning, the world outside her windows was blurred in streaks of gray. I was already there, sitting at her kitchen table. Neither of us had slept much. I'd stayed after Tyler left, too restless to go home, too aware that whatever decision she'd made last night was still hanging between us. Claire stood at the counter, pouring coffee, her movements slow, deliberate. She set a mug in front of me, then leaned on the opposite side of the table. Tyler knows, she said. No preamble. No pretending. I swallowed. Did he say something? She nodded faintly. Called me late. Asked if I was involved with you. I didn't answer. The air tightened around us. What are you going to do? I asked. Her eyes held mine. That depends on what you want. It wasn't a casual question. It was a line drawn, one we'd been circling for weeks. I want you, I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. I don't care who knows. She flinched, almost imperceptibly. You might not care now, but people talk. People judge. You think you're ready for that. But I've thought about it every day. I cut in. The only thing I'm not ready for is pretending this doesn't matter. Her breath caught, and for a second, I saw her fighting herself, the same hesitation that had kept her from crossing the line before. But then something shifted. She came around the table, stopping right in front of me. If we do this, she said, there's no going back. We can't undo it later. I know. For a long moment, we just stood there. Her hand was inches from mine, her eyes searching my face like she was memorizing every reason to say no. Then she took my hand. The contact was small, simple, but it was also the choice. I pulled her closer, and she didn't resist. We were so close now that the world outside the rain-blurred glass might as well not have existed. Her forehead rested against mine, her breathing uneven. This scares me, she whispered. I know, I said. It scares me too. And then, for the first time, there was no hesitation. She kissed me, not tentative, not testing, but like she'd been holding it back for months and couldn't anymore. It wasn't perfect. Our hands fumbled, our breaths were too fast, but it was real in a way nothing else had been. When we finally broke apart, she kept her eyes closed for a moment, then opened them slowly. So what now? I didn't have an answer, but her hand was still in mine, and she didn't let go. Outside, the rain kept falling. It had been 3 weeks since that morning in her kitchen. Tyler hadn't said anything, at least not to me. Whether it was out of loyalty, discomfort, or something else, I didn't know. But the silence was its own kind of answer. Claire and I didn't try to hide anymore, though we didn't exactly make it obvious either. We found a rhythm, quiet mornings with coffee, walks in the park when it was cloudy enough to keep the crowds away, evenings when she'd read on the couch while I cooked dinner in her too small kitchen. There were moments when I caught her looking at me with something that wasn't quite peace, like she was happy but still carrying the weight of how fragile it all was. I think I wore the same look when she wasn't watching. One Sunday, we drove out to the coast. The sky was a pale, winter blue, the water restless. We walked along the shore, shoes in hand, the cold waves reaching for our feet. You know this could still get messy, she said after a while. I laughed quietly. It's already messy. She smiled, but her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Messy I can live with. Losing you, I can't. I stopped walking, letting the water lap around my ankles. You're not going to lose me. Her eyes found mine then, and I think we both believed it in that moment, even if neither of us could promise it forever. Back at her place, we sat on the porch as the sun dropped low. I thought about all the ways this could have gone differently, how easy it would have been to walk away before it ever started. But sitting there with her hand in mine, the air cooling around us, I realized I didn't regret a single step that had brought me here. She squeezed my hand. You still scare me, she admitted softly. Good, I said. You scare me too. We didn't need to say the rest, that maybe being scared meant it mattered, that maybe the risk was the proof. The street was quiet, the sky fading into soft purple, and for the first time, I felt like we weren't bracing for the next interruption. She leaned her head on my shoulder. So, do we tell people? I thought about Tyler, about her ex, about every sideways glance we might get. Eventually, I said, but right now, I just want this. And for the rest of the evening, this was enough.